veto is, again, I think it's a red herring. Veto is not in the UN Declaration. In the legal jurisprudence of consent in Canada, they're not talking about veto. Veto and consent are two different things. And veto implies sort of an absolute power for someone to say yes or no, but it's an absolute. And consent is not an absolute. And then it is an evaluation of the facts and the law. So this, of course, is one of the touchy examples, is a pipeline, because a pipeline can cross many people's territories. Well, if the pipeline is crossing your territory in an area where, say there was a pipeline burst, you have the assessment that maybe that is going to have a minimal environmental impact, versus where your territory is on the route, say at the mouth of the route, where if there was a spill, it could have catastrophic effects for your entire territory. Well, obviously, the opinion of that First Nation has got to be held in a higher standard than someone who might have a very minimal impact from the project. And you have to weigh that. That's the facts and the law. You need to weigh those facts. And so it's not, sometimes people will say, well, what if you have 50 First Nations along the route and 45 of them are good with it and 5 aren't? Well, what are we supposed to do then? Well, you need to look at the whole thing. The 5 that aren't, why aren't they? What are their concerns? Are there ways to address those concerns? If they're not, I think the Kinder Morgan pipeline is a really interesting example. It's a very challenging example, but it's also the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. They are at the foot of that pipeline, and they had their scientists do and traditional knowledge keepers do an environmental assessment on their territory if there was a pipeline and there was a spill. Well, did the federal government look at their work? No, they didn't. Well, come on. That's not about relationship. So I think that, you can sometimes with a project, it might be, well, the First Nation doesn't want to move ahead with this project, but if we were to meet these conditions, they're willing to relook at the project proposal. Okay, so then you're in dialogue, then you're in conversation. Or it might, I know that with the Crees in northern Quebec, there was some uranium work where they said, nope, there is no way you can bring this project to us that we can support it. And the province of Quebec, the developer, the corporation, was very angry about that. And the province of Quebec stood up and supported them. So I think that it is, some of this is also about, like that free, prior, and informed consent. Look at the facts and the law in each situation. If there are concerns raised by a First Nation that can be addressed in a manner that everyone, because I think one of the things that we say is consent is the right to say yes, it is the right to say no, and it is the right to say yes with conditions. And it can't be that Indigenous peoples don't have that. If it's their land, they have to live with the consequences of the decisions. So they have to be able to make choices for themselves. And if you build relationship and you can address, who knows? Maybe all of a sudden you realize that a project proposal, if modified, is actually something that can be explored. I think it's, but not enough time and attention has been put into that, right? I think that environmental assessment agencies haven't put enough time and attention into it. They also haven't put enough time and attention into the human rights aspects of projects. It's not just necessarily about the environmental aspects. There's also human rights aspects. And some of the bigger picture pieces, when a large development project goes ahead, sometimes they have what they call man camps because the workers come in, particularly in remote areas. Well, women and children become very vulnerable in those situations. So what safeguards are being put in place to ensure the health and safety of everyone, the health and safety of everyone, the men, the women, the children, so you can't just ram that kind of stuff in without looking at all the pieces that you need to be looking at.
It's proposing a far different way of working together than what it has been in the past, where and I say in the past, but maybe even in the like currently right now that so I really appreciate the highlighting that the consent is the engagement to keep working at it, not to you'll say yes, but until like there there are solutions that could be arrived, or to the point where you know what, maybe it's not viable because you really have strong points to make, and you know we need to come back at it at a different way, or start over, or do away. But those are all process that's part of engagement. It's the veto that you say is like the walking away and that's done, but the consent is the engagement, the time, the working at it, and making sure all parts are reflected and heard and honored and addressed.